let's stop talking about wallets and credentials for a minute. Most people on this call, I think, know who I am. I've interacted with a lot of folks, so I'll kind of skip through this. And most people also, I think, have a good idea of kind of digital trust and the problem statement that we're trying to solve in this space, but I'll just go through this anyways to just slowly move us into the trust registry conversation. And I think this deck should be shared afterwards, so any of the links should be clickable or accessible afterwards. So as we all know, there's lacking a trust layer on the internet. Any identifier and claims being made are difficult to trust, kind of out of the box, the way things are today. And so we all know that this has resulted in us delegating our identifiers, our identities to third parties. It's created power imbalances, big platforms on the internet owning our data, poor UX, one-way authentication channels. We rely on unsafe channels as well. And this has all kind of resulted in ever-growing fraud, abuse, spam, and myself, like every day I get spam messages, and sometimes I need to take a double look. So you can imagine someone that's not living and breathing this every day, who is getting spammed constantly. It's not the best situation. And we all know there can't be one global identity solution to help solve all of these problems. We need multiple tools in our toolbox, and that's kind of the way of looking at this so that we could hopefully achieve more trusted digital interactions. Wallets and credentials suck up a lot of the air in the space that we operate in, but they alone don't create trusted digital interactions. So in that credential exchange that I have here, you start to ask yourself all sorts of questions depending on where are you sitting in the interaction, right? The issuer on the left-hand side, wondering if the wallet that they're issuing a credential into is a safe or authorized wallet to hold their credentials. The holder wondering if they're being phished, if the organization they're interacting with that is offering them a credential is legit or not. The holder wondering that if they're being asked to share data, are they being scammed? Is the verifier allowed to ask me for this data? These are all problems that just happen on the internet today, but regardless of using digital credentials, these things still kind of exist. And then the other question on the verifier side here is the credential being presented to me, does it have authority? Was it coming from an authorized issuer? So that kind of gets us into the three type of things that we should be checking when there are claims happening digitally. The first one that we get kind of out of the box with digital credentials and wallets is more of that technical trust side of things, right? We have that already with the standards and the open source technologies we use with the cryptography. I know that a piece of data hasn't been tampered with. It was signed, it hasn't been altered, falsified. Okay, good. But all these questions that I had in that last slide are more questions that have to do with point 2 and 3, which are more about the human trust side of things, where digital credentials and wallets don't really answer these for us. So the second point here, that the claim has accurate representation. So I want to know that the identifier that I'm interacting with is represented accordingly to an entity which I think I'm talking to. So that's more of an authentication challenge. And the third one is more of an authorization challenge. I want to know that the identifier that I'm talking to is actually authorized under some trust framework or has some backing or root of trust that I could rely on to know if they have authority to do whatever they're claiming to be able to do. And so to establish this human trust across various contexts, remember, we can't just have that one system on the internet to help us achieve trust online. So we'll likely require thousands of different trust input sources, which I have on that right-hand side there, where this is where we start to introduce trust registries, right? So when I'm starting a transaction in any application on the left-hand side, based on my context, I need to make a decision. And when I need to make a decision, maybe I'm good with the party I'm interacting with and I could move forward. But if I have some doubts or uncertainties, that's when maybe I'll seek some trust inputs. And that's where we start to look at things like the Trust over IP's trust registry protocol, which there are a couple of the co-chairs from that task force within the Trust over IP on this call So they've developed a specification or protocol to be able to interact with trust input sources or trust registries. So I may need to ask for some inputs to help me make a trust decision. And then I come back, and based on the inputs that I got in a self-sovereign manner, as I continue to be in control of what I'm doing, I could decide what direction to go in. So really, trust registries at the core address gaps in attribution, right? It allows me to know that, yeah, a specific entity is in control or owns a specific identifier or set of identifiers, and then there are some claims made about this entity against these identifiers. One example of a trust registry that we're probably all familiar with, and I'm still surprised that we're, at least where I live, I still get these delivered, but a yellow pages, for example, right? Or a phone book, as we call it, it's kind of like a trust registry, right? If we use that model of the entity identifiers and claims in the attribution context, well, a phone book tells me that these specific companies, this is their phone number, their identifier, and this is the nature of their business. So Plumbing Services Inc., this is their identifier, and this is the nature of their business, plumbing services. Just like the International Civil Aviation Organization, specialized agency of the United Nations, kind of does something similar, right? They're saying that this entity representing this country, this is their public key certificate, and the claim that they're making is they have authority to issue a specific travel document. So similar context within that same model, right? Of just being able to solve attribution problems with entities, identifiers, and claims. But if we jump back to the wallets and credentials and back to the title of my talk here, let's stop talking about these things. Difficult to move away from them, but I'll try in the next few slides. So ultimately, what is a digital credential? Well, digital credential are claims that are being made in a standard way, right? And they're done using identifiers, they're done using standards for credentials and agents and protocols and all of that good stuff. But getting an ecosystem up and running with wallets and credentials is a journey, said nicely, right? We all kind of know, and everyone kind of understands that the more demand and supply exists within a marketplace, the more value is kind of created for everyone. But to bootstrap a marketplace, to get everyone set up with wallet and credentialing infrastructure, as most of you on the call today who work in this space know, it is a very difficult proposition. On the other hand, trust registries, just like digital credentials, contain a representation of claims. It's just kind of in a different type of format or architecture, but claims made under a governance framework that could be stored somewhere, whether they're stored locally in a list, whether this list is in a central place or could be exported, whether the list is distributed in a distributed architecture or a blockchain, doesn't matter, right? Wherever you want to store these things. But compared to the other side of things with the digital trust ecosystem with wallets and credentials, any ecosystem governing organization could decide to operate a trust registry kind of on their own, right? Without obviously needing to interact with their ecosystem, but you don't need to have a whole ecosystem up and running with wallet infrastructure that supports credential exchange. And maybe in some situations, claims that are in a trust registry are enough to provide enough assurance as an input for me to make a trust decision. And perhaps a claim in a trust registry could really up-level the trust in an ecosystem just on its own. So what does this look like in the context of these digital trust registries that we're talking about? I gave a couple examples, but in this one, if I follow the same model, I have, and I'll use the example of a member association over the next slides. A member association has authority over their membership, over their ecosystem. And so they could have a governance framework for their specific association, Association 1 on the top, and then they could start specifying, all right, Acme Corporation Inc. is my member. These are verified identifiers that I have for Acme Corporation. So this is their website, this is their phone number, and perhaps this is their decentralized identifier. And maybe Acme Corporation has a didwebacmecorp.com. Or maybe if Acme Corp is not already onboarded to this digital trust infrastructure, maybe the association wants to allocate a DID on behalf of Acme Corp, so under their namespace. So if association1.com is a trusted namespace, then a DID web under that namespace maybe just has trust off of the bat and could be associated or assigned by the member organization to the member, and if the member eventually wants to bring their own DID, as we say, they'll be able to do that. And then the claim we talk about, well, the Acme Corporation is a member of my organization. Acme Corporation maybe is authorized to issue credentials under my governance. Acme Corporation is authorized to ask for certain types of proof requests. There are kind of any type of claim could be made in this format. So really what we think is a trust registry could help up-level trust in ecosystems, but could really help drive service discovery and create engagement for members within your ecosystem, whether it's a corporate business registry, whether it's just an industry member association or a national association or a regulator's ecosystem. Most transactions are not going to come, at least today, from wallets, right? Or agents that are querying that is someone authorized to issue a credential. We're not quite there with the adoption cycle there, but there are tons of transactions that come from web pages, from browsers, from email clients, from data sharing applications, other apps, APIs. These could interact with trust registries on their own, right? To get trust inputs in different scenarios. So if we're able to leverage traffic from here and actually have trust registries available for other types of applications outside of wallets or agents to be able to interact with trust registries, then we could start to look at trust registries as a way to enable an ecosystem to start interacting with wallets and with credentials. And it kind of creates that cycle, right? If we have wallets and credentials, they can leverage the trust registry, but if there's a trust registry in place and no wallet and credential ecosystem, it could really spur demand for that type of stuff, which I will go a little bit deeper in my next few slides as I wrap this up. I'm at 12 minutes, I'm doing okay. Next slide. So we've been working on a trust registry solution at Northern Block for the past year, perhaps. I will give a lot of credit to the thinking that happened in the Trust over IP's Trust Registry Task Force. I think that group is ahead of its time and pushing a lot of good thinking and actually deliverables forward in the space. So anyone interested in learning more, I think that's a good forum. And so based on the collaboration in there, we started building product, and I'll just show you a few examples of what we think are very valuable to do in a trust registry, which we're supporting today. So one is just making a claim about your members, right? So if you have a membership, for example, you have certain authority over that membership, you could start to make claims about your members. And the types of claims that you can make, that's when we start getting into the different types of data models or the different types of standards that we want to make these claims in. I can make claims as a verifiable credential. I could also make claims within an OpenID Federation entity statement, which John will get to quite shortly, which is what we'll be implementing in here as well. So there's different architectures or different ways that you may want to make claims about your member, but this is almost more from, if we think about the trust registry operator, more as like an issuer, right? You're issuing a claim, you're making a claim, and you're publishing it within your list. So you're able to do that in here. The second piece that we think is quite innovative and quite interesting is a trust registry operator could publish verification results. So what does that mean? Well, if a member of a trust registry comes to their trust registry operator or their member association, and they say, you know, in this context, it's a mining, natural resource mining trust registry I'm talking about, but maybe the mining company has a business certificate or a health and safety certificate or any type of external credential that could come from an external ecosystem or from someone else. Well, they could come to this trust registry, and the trust registry, kind of acting as a verifier in this case, could say, okay, please show me your business license. I'm going to consume it. I'm going to verify it. And if I mutually recognize this government entity or whoever issued you this credential that I'm able to consume, then perhaps I could publish the results in here. So all of a sudden you start to get richer data sets that in a trust registry, you have the one portion of data that could come from, you know, I'm making a claim under my authority, but I could also broadcast certain verification results to the public to just create more trust about my ecosystem, to say, okay, I've actually done a verification for this mining company. They've shown me their business license, and I'm showing you that I've done that verification here. And we feel like there's a lot of use cases here to align this to certain governance frameworks or certain levels of assurances that are coming out of bodies like Etsy or the Digital Identity and Authentication Council of Canada's Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, you could start to use this mechanism to align and create assurance around your trust registry. So combining this with that prior model creates a rich experience. And lastly, just we feel like a trust registry, I talked about that feedback loop, but I really think this could create demand for digital credential solution providers, whether you're providing wallets, whether you're providing credential exchange solutions. If you're helping your governing authority or governing authorities operating a trust registry, you could start to link this to wallets and to credentials like I talked about. But if you have a specific member within your trust registry that's not already enabled with a wallet or with credentials, and they see that there's another member in that list that already has them, and they're broadcasting the data that they've been able to share with the trust registry or the claims that the trust registry made about them, it might become interesting for a member to say, hey, how do I get this same type of thing? Like my competitor of mine or my associate organization in the industry looks like they have high assurance. It looks like they have credentials that they're displaying. How do I do that? So we see trust registries as being a path for service discovery to also be able to push credential exchange solutions and wallets. So it kind of goes both ways, right? We often start thinking about trust registries from the perspective of I need a trust input. So I want to query a trust registry for my credential exchange. But you could actually think about it the other way too, that I come into a trust registry, I see claims, I get information. If I want to take that a step further, then I could actually go through here and get on-ramped into different vendor solutions. So we think this is an interesting feature for any vendor of wallets and credential exchange protocols. So we're actively building this. We have different key platform modules that we're focusing on, so that we have a claim management module, a member management module, a governance module, and an identifier management module. Anyone using our system is able to publish branded trust registries on a public domain. You could see the standards that we're supporting and that we're looking to support in the near future. We're really just looking to work with more and more people in the space that are driving use cases forward, that want to promote the adoption of credentials and wallets, because we feel like having a trust anchor for your ecosystem is going to enable more engagement and more interactions and more adoption overall.